May 1945. The war ends and the Luftwaffe collapses almost instantly. Across Europe, thousands of German aircraft lie abandoned, ranging from iconic fighters to pioneering jets and unfinished experimental designs. The Allies suddenly have access to technology years ahead of its era, and a quiet race begins to recover, analyze, or eliminate every machine they uncover. Luftwaffe aircraft at Germany's surrender. In early May 1945, as Germany capitulated, the Luftwaffe had effectively stopped functioning. Planes sat deserted on airfields from Norway to Austria, some still whole, others stripped for components or damaged by bombing. Severe fuel shortages, disorganized command, and shattered infrastructure had grounded many formations for weeks. By the time the surrender became official on 8 May, thousands of aircraft remained exactly where they had last stood, silent relics of a force that once dominated Europe's skies. Across northern Germany, key locations such as Flensburg and Lübeck contained large concentrations of parked aircraft, a mix of intact, damaged, and incomplete airframes. In Prague, hangars were filled with Messerschmitts, Heinkels, and late-war prototypes. At Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's principal testing site, Allied investigators uncovered experimental models, wind tunnel equipment, and research documents revealing the extent of Germany's jet and rocket development. The diversity of surviving aircraft surprised many Allied officers. Alongside classics like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf FW 190, they found cutting-edge creations such as the Arado R-234 jet bomber, the Heinkel He-162, and remnants of projects like the Junkers Ju-287 bomber. Transport and reconnaissance types, including the Junkers Ju-52 and Heinkel He-111, were scattered across airfields as well. Many units had simply run out of fuel during the war's final weeks, leaving their machines parked and untouched. By the end of the fighting, the Luftwaffe's administrative structure had collapsed entirely. Commanders surrendered to whichever Allied units they met, while ground crews often abandoned their posts without instructions. Maintenance logs, fuel depots, and spare parts stores were missing or destroyed. The Allied Control Commission quickly imposed strict regulations. All German aircraft were grounded, and no German pilot could fly without direct Allied permission. These rules aimed to prevent unauthorized departures, escape attempts, or the relocation of senior officials. A debate soon erupted among Allied commands regarding what should be preserved and what should be eliminated. Some officers insisted that intact German aircraft posed a danger, while others recognized the value they held for research. What is certain is that from the earliest days after the surrender, the destiny of the Luftwaffe's aircraft became a matter of intelligence gathering, logistical planning, and political strategy. How the Allies captured Luftwaffe aircraft. Immediately after Germany's surrender, the Allies launched large-scale recovery operations to secure the Luftwaffe's most advanced designs. The United States acted first. On 9th May 1945, one day after the formal capitulation, American intelligence units initiated Operation Lusty, short for Luftwaffe Secret Technology. Under Colonel Harold Watson, teams spread across Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. Their mission was straightforward: locate cutting-edge aircraft, secure technical documentation, and transport selected machines back to the United States for examination. At Lechfeld, U.S. forces took control of several intact Messerschmitt Me-262 jets. At Grove Airfield in Denmark, they found Arado jet bombers and a variety of late-war prototypes. Aircraft judged valuable were flown or dismantled for shipment to Wright Field in Ohio. Others were sent to Freeman Field in Indiana, where analysis units catalogued airframes, engines, and design characteristics. Pilots from the Watson's Whizzers group test flew captured jets under controlled conditions. Their evaluations informed early American knowledge of swept wings, jet propulsion, and high-speed aerodynamics. The British launched a parallel effort known as Operation Surgeon. Unlike the Americans, who prioritized seizing aircraft, the British were equally focused on capturing the engineers, scientists, and technicians behind them. Teams from the Royal Aircraft Establishment entered airfields at Fassberg, Schleswig, Husum, and Rechlin, interviewing surviving personnel and collecting documents. Selected specialists were moved to British facilities for post-war work. At RAF Farnborough, test pilots flew captured aircraft, including the Me-262, to study their performance. The British held particular interest in the He-162, whose lightweight construction offered lessons for future trainers and interceptors. The Soviet Union moved quickly as well. Its trophy brigades captured factories and airfields across Saxony, Thuringia, Silesia, and Czechoslovakia. Major production centres such as the Avia facilities in Prague and Bf 109 assembly plants in Moravia fell under Soviet control. Aircraft were shipped east by rail alongside tooling machinery and technical personnel. At bases near Moscow and Leningrad, Soviet designers and pilots studied the Me-262 and R-234, integrating their findings into early jet programs. Rivalry soon developed among the Allies. Each power sought access to the rarest aircraft, especially prototypes produced in limited quantities. Disputes arose over which side was entitled to specific machines, particularly in central Germany, where American and Soviet units arrived only days apart. The Allied Control Council attempted to coordinate these efforts, but frictions reflecting emerging Cold War divisions were already apparent. German personnel contributed significantly to these operations. Former pilots, mechanics, and engineers provided technical explanations, sometimes under supervision and sometimes through temporary employment. Their knowledge helped Allied teams operate complex systems such as the Jumo 004 and BMW 003 jet engines, as well as advanced navigation equipment. The Allies documented everything: photographs, blueprints, manuals, and test results, before determining which aircraft to preserve and which to destroy. By late 1946, the major collection efforts had concluded. Dozens of Luftwaffe aircraft had been transported to the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union for evaluation. These programs influenced early jet development and led to the next stage, the dismantling of everything left behind. Why the Allies destroyed most Luftwaffe aircraft. By late 1945, the Allied Control Council decreed that Germany was forbidden from retaining any military aircraft. The most valuable examples had already been shipped abroad. The thousands that remained were slated for destruction, turning European airfields into enormous scrapyards between 1945 and 1948. The order was clear. Every German aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, and prototypes had to be disposed of unless selected for research. Bases such as Flensburg, Lübeck-Blankensee, Grove, and Tarnowitz became disposal centres where Allied crews stripped and crushed airframes, diverting metal into Europe's reconstruction industries. Designations before most were retired and dismantled. France, which operated several German types for training and testing, eventually phased them out as spare parts dwindled and maintenance became impractical. Historians continue to debate whether more aircraft could have been saved. Some argue that numerous unique airframes were lost simply because museums or archives lacked space to store them. Others emphasize that Allied priorities centered on demilitarization rather than preservation, and that the political imperative to dismantle Germany's war machine outweighed concerns about historical value. The small number of surviving Luftwaffe aircraft today is a direct consequence of this destruction phase. Economic considerations also shaped the disposal process. Europe faced significant metal shortages, and aluminum and steel from Luftwaffe aircraft were highly valuable. Recycling airframes helped support industries producing consumer goods, infrastructure components, and essential machinery. For many local workers, scrapping aircraft offered steady employment during a difficult transitional period. By 1948, the overwhelming majority of Luftwaffe aircraft had vanished. Airfields that once housed major fighter and bomber units were cleared or repurposed. Some became training grounds for Allied occupation troops, others returned to agricultural use or were converted into civilian airports. The surviving Luftwaffe aircraft, after WW2, even as most Luftwaffe aircraft were destroyed after 1945, a smaller group entered new service under foreign flags. From 1946 onward, several nations operated German-designed aircraft out of necessity, availability, or technical curiosity. These fleets were usually short-lived, but they played a meaningful role in early post-war aviation. Czechoslovakia was among the first to reuse German equipment. Factories in Prague, Kunovice and Letňany contained completed aircraft and unfinished airframes, which engineers assembled into operational fighters. The most famous product was the Avia S-199. Despite its difficult handling, the S-199 equipped the Czechoslovak Air Force until newer Soviet models replaced it. Several were later sold to Israel, becoming the young nation's first fighter aircraft in 1948. Spain also extended the lifespan of German fighters. Under licensing agreements dating back to the late 1930s, Spanish factories produced the Hispano Aviation HA-1112, a modified Bf-109 variant fitted with Spanish-built engines. These aircraft served in the Spanish Air Force into the mid-1950s. Decades later, they famously portrayed German fighters in films such as The Battle of Britain. Norway operated captured Bf-109s and R-96 trainers during its early post-war rebuilding. Parts shortages eventually grounded the aircraft, but several airframes survived long enough to be restored in the 1960s and 1970s. Civil aviation benefited indirectly from surviving German technology. The Junkers Ju-52 continued in passenger service in several countries. In France, the Toucan variant was built at Amiot factories and used in colonial transport roles. Lufthansa briefly operated Ju-52s in the early 1950s before transitioning to newly produced aircraft. At Grove, rows of fighters were dismantled. In northern Germany, British teams destroyed intact bombers that had survived the war. Even advanced jets were reduced to scrap unless assigned to evaluation programs. Some aircraft were burned in pits or loaded onto barges and scuttled offshore. Many of these submerged wrecks remain where they were sunk, occasionally found by divers. Civilian aviation faced restrictions as well. Aircraft such as the Junkers Ju-52, which served both military and civil roles, were reviewed individually. A few were converted for limited transport duties, but many were still scrapped to align with Allied policy. In Czechoslovakia, captured aircraft briefly flew under new. By the time West Germany established the Bundesluftwaffe in 1956, none of the old Luftwaffe types were considered for operational service. The new Air Force relied on Allied aircraft such as the F-84 Thunderstreak, the Canadair Sabre, and later the F-104 Starfighter. German aviation had fully entered the jet age, leaving wartime designs behind. Interest in preserving surviving airframes increased in the latter half of the 20th century. Many of today's museum pieces originate from crash sites, remote lakes, or long-buried wrecks from the Eastern Front. Restorers often combined components from several airframes to reconstruct a single display example. Today, only a small number of original Luftwaffe aircraft remain intact. Examples of the Me-262, Bf-109, FW-190, and Arado R-234 stand in museums from Washington to Berlin, while a handful of privately built replicas fly at airshows. Nearly all wartime-built aircraft remain grounded. What survives today represents only a fragment of the enormous force once spread across Europe, silent reminders of how quickly even the most advanced machines can vanish, and how the post-war era reshaped the legacy of German aviation. If you found this video informative, watch what happened to German U-boats after WW2. Next, a detailed look at how the U-boat fleet was captured, analysed, and dispersed across the globe after the war. Like this video, subscribe and hit the bell for more History Inside. Thanks for watching.